thanks for coming along today. And I think we will just kick off. We've got a lot of exciting content to get through today, which we're really excited to share with you. Welcome along to our session in partnership with the Scottish Men's Shed Association. My name's Julie Beckett. I'm CLD Development Officer with Education Scotland, and I cover the Forth Valley and West Lothian region. Also joined today by my colleague Susan Epsworth, who is a CLD Education Officer covering the Tayside team, who will probably be giving you a little wave just now if you can see her on your screen. And we are very delighted to be joined today by our speakers. Jason Schroeder, the founder and Chief Executive Officer of the Scottish Men's Shed Association. I'm sure Jason will be giving you a wee wave just now as well. And Danielle Hutcheon from the Eunice Centre for Social, Business and Health at Glasgow Caledonian Uni. We're really pleased to be facilitating this webinar today and hope you enjoy the session. First, we will start with a little bit of housekeeping. So this session today is being recorded. So please turn off your camera if you would not like to feature in the recording. Sometimes there's little boxes at the top of the screen that people's faces are in, which end up in the recording. So if you don't want that to happen, please keep your camera off. And please keep your mic on mute because we sometimes get some interference or some echoes and things if people have their mic on. We'll have time at the questions for the end. So at that point in time, we can put our mics on and have a chat. And if you have any questions as we go through this for the speakers, you can pop comments and questions in the chat box. And I'll just give it a wee second, let people get in from the lobby, that's great. So just to highlight today the aims of the session, which you see are on the screen. Our aims today are around awareness raising of the shed movement and the Scottish Men's Shed Association, and also highlighting the impact that shed membership can have both on individuals and their local communities. So back in October, I think it was, 2020, one of our colleagues was aware of work going on in a shed local to her and highlighted to us the kind of positive community partnerships that were going on and intergeneral learning that was happening. So this led us to our first initial conversations with Jason back, I think that was October 2020, but due to various kind of COVID related disruptions, we have found ourselves here today in February 2022. So we hope to have a short panel discussion Q&A at the end of the presentations and some time to reflect on the links to our own practice and how you could make links with your local shed. But first we're going to do a quick Menti activity. So if you haven't seen Mentimeter before, it is an online engagement tool. So you can use your phone to scan the QR code, or you can use a link, which I'm just going to pop into the chat pane now. You can click on the link and that should also take you to the Mentimeter. And it'll just be asking you one question, which is, how much do you know about Scottish men's sheds? And this is in the way that if we were in person, we could have done a bit of a post-it note and A3 paper activity, but now online we use Mentimeter. So hopefully I'll just take over sharing the screen there and we will see that people are starting to input now. So that is fantastic that people have managed to get on that. That's great. And hopefully you'll see there, we get a little average coming up. People are about a 3.6. That's fab that we're able to see that, and we will go back at the end and do this question again in true evaluation style. So I can see 15 people have got on the Menti so far, that's great. And we'll give it a wee second just to load if there's anybody else managing to get on there. Don't worry if you can't get access to that, it's no problem at all, we're just really happy you're here today. Susan, I'll hand over to you for a wee bit of the policy background.
Thanks, Julie. And apologies, folks, it's just when you're sharing screen and then getting ready to talk at the same time, it can all get very confusing. We've just got a slide here showing some of the national policy context just to make those links for folk. I know that we've got a really mixed audience. We've got some shedders, which we're delighted to have with us today. We've got some CLD practitioners. We've got some teachers. So hopefully everybody will take away something that might be slightly different. And some of these policies on the screen will chime differently with different people. We've got the adult learning and youth work strategies. Both of these are due to be refreshed and relaunched, hopefully in spring 2022. We're all waiting with bated breath for those. And we've also got the Scottish Attainment Challenge. SAC 2 was launched recently, and there's a bit of a focus there, a shift in focus from attainment to achievement. And hopefully you'll see some of the information in the next 90 minutes, how that might support your work and support the learners that you're working with. We've got GIRFEC there. We've got CFE, again, Curriculum for Excellence, and that idea that the curriculum is not only happening and delivered in the classroom, but also out with the classroom. And again, you might get some ideas from today about how men's sheds and links with local men's sheds can support that work. And lastly, just to point out the National Occupational Standards for Community Development. We'll go into this a wee bit more. Both Julie and Jason will talk about why that matters to men's sheds and the importance of that in regards to things like place and funding, and we'll talk about that a bit more. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Jason Schroeder, he's doing the majority of the talking today, folks, and it's really, really, really interesting stuff. So I'll hand over to Jason.
Thanks, Susan. Well, that's a big up, and no pressure then today. So thanks, folks, for coming on today. Really good to have you all on board. As we said, I'm representing the Scottish Men's Shed Association. And if we can move to the next slide, Susan. Really, the intention today is to give a very broad outline on the many aspects of men's sheds that it now exists across the world globally. It's almost like you have an iceberg, and on the top of the iceberg is the wee shed, and underneath is a lot of these social issues that are hidden from our societies and community in the world, which we often don't speak about. And thankfully, the men's shed movement has brought men's health into the forefront of people's awareness. For hundreds of years, it actually hasn't really been looked at or spoken about. And it's definitely now on the forefront, talking to MSPs, etc., and governments across the world. So my hope today is that you will go, when you leave here, feel a lot more rounded about, I see there's a 3.6 on the 5 Menti, that you know stuff about men's sheds, which is good. Hopefully you will find a lot more about men's sheds that you might never even thought about. And mainly for me is that you become inspired, like I was 12 years ago, to get involved with men's sheds and support them in your community and be concerned about our men's health as well. So let's move on to the next slide and dive deeper into the movement of what's going on. So you can see here that we now have about 2,208, almost, according to some literature, 3,000 sheds across the world. They started in the late 90s, really officially, let's say, in Australia. And some of those sheds are still veteran-only sheds from those Vietnam days, of those war times. And it's kind of spread from Australia out to New Zealand, England, up into Scotland, etc., etc. And now you can see on the right, on the left-hand side there, Czech Republic, Norway, Germany, Holland, etc. The European countries are getting involved and seeing that there's some serious health issues with men. And of course, at the very bottom there, America has now finally got on board. We've supported America with quite a lot of our literature to get the American Association up and running, following our Scottish model, which is about community development and a grassroots movement, bottom up rather than a top down model. And we even have some sheds in Kenya and starting in South Africa. So really this has become a global movement. In Scotland, look at that map. Isn't it a beautiful thing to see? All those lovely men's sheds across our country. You know, in 2013, there was one shed in Aberdeenshire in West Hill, where it was started. At the time, I was a CLD worker in youth work and could see in our community centres that there were not many men involved in the community centres. Loads of women, but no men. And that started the question in our youth groups as well. Where are the boys? Where are the men? What's going on with them if they're not working? And that got me into looking at this whole model of what is happening to our male health and male men. And now we can see these years on, we have 200 open and developing, engaging more than 10,000 men across Scotland. And folks, that's voluntarily engaging men. That is unprecedented, to use a favorite word at the moment. Unprecedented amount of men voluntarily engaging in a health movement. Wow, who would have thought that the humble shed would actually get men excited and connecting? But it has. So look at that map, growing all the time. So the Men's Shed Association, why does it even exist? Why was it even created back in 2014, and we launched in 2016 in Glasgow in the Lighthouse? And it is to bring a pathway of success to men out there who might want to start a shed. It's very important to say that men's sheds are not run by us. They are run by the men for the men. So this is a real grassroots movement. It is in typical fashion that men often want to take responsibility and plow ahead on great adventures into the far horizon. And when we retire or lose our jobs or whatever, that often is taken from us and then cycle down into depression and unfortunately to suicide, as we're seeing presently in our country. Next slide, please, Susan. So just a couple of milestones. You can see the Men's Shed movement started back in 2009 when I was still a development officer for Aberdeenshire Council. It then started to grow across the country, and I then resigned from there and joined Aberdeenshire Voluntary Action as the third sector interface to start sheds after Westall opened across Aberdeenshire. That then started the flow of interest from across the country. And from that point on, you can just see, we've had the Glasgow Caledonian University where Dr. Danny is going to be talking later on this afternoon about the 4-year research that she's just completing and will complete it finally. I've become a very patient man waiting 4 years for that to arrive on our scene, because that really gives us some validity and rigorous proof for the academics out there and governments to really see that this isn't some lightweight movement. This carries a lot of weight with health and well-being in our country. We can also see things like the Scottish Men's Shed Year Awards. So we're now, as you can see in that picture, this was this year's award to the Westall Men's Shed, who got the Queen's Award. We'll go into that a bit later as well. And it's very prestigious to be part of the Men's Shed movement. And I do encourage you to join us, which is free, men and women over the age of 18, to join us and to support us. Because without you, the movement doesn't exist. And then right now, 2022, we're moving into a very exciting development phase. We're in discussions with cabinet ministers at the moment about development officers to support the men after the COVID recovery, because guys and the network of sheds is pretty tired after these last 2 years. And moving forward we've lost some sheds, unfortunately, they've closed, but we've also seen a lot of new sheds starting, and sheds are never going to be more important than now, post-COVID recovery. So exciting times for all of us. Okay, next slide. So as the association, we carry a 2-tier membership. Firstly, for sheds themselves. So when you are a developing shed or proposing shed, and a guy phones me and says, "Hey, Jason, I've heard about men's sheds. How do I start one?" Right up to sheds who have been running for 5-6 years now, who have sustainability issues possibly. They are all financed by the men themselves. We also have, of course, at this time, after post-COVID, reconciliation and mediation that we facilitate and help the men get back together. As I said, there's a lot of stress out there and a lot of fear. How do they open the sheds, etc., etc. The Shedder itself, which is our newsletter or magazine, which goes out to nearly 3,000 people every 6 weeks, keeps the whole movement alive. And then more importantly, maybe for you people on here today, is the individual membership, which is free. We encourage anybody over the age of 18, man and woman, who wants to support the Men's Shed movement, our sons, our grandfathers, and our dads, etc. It is the women out there, our lovely women, who are the networkers and the movers and shakers in our communities. And if it wasn't for these wives and grandmothers and mothers, telling their husbands and friends about the Men's Shed movement, we wouldn't be where we are today, and we can't do it without you. So please do join us and support us in it as well. Okay, next slide. Representation, you can see quite incredible, from a very small charity back in 16 with just 6 or 7 trustees all volunteering our time at that point. You can see who we've got involved with and who wants to be involved with us, from Macmillan, the Royal Blind, Voluntary Health Scotland, Help for Heroes, of course Glasgow Caledonian University, British Red Cross, Age Scotland, and the list just grows and grows as people find out about it. So really a co-production grassroots movement happening there from the top down, supporting on all those levels. And who is in the Men's Shed Association themselves? If we just go back there, Susan 1, we will see that we've got 6 trustees. These are shedders from across the country, all in their own sheds themselves, representing their areas. We are still looking for the Highlands, so if anybody in the Highlands wants to become a trustee of us, please do get in touch. And then at the bottom, there's myself and our comms officer, Michelle Wybrew, and our administrator, Sue Salter. And we've just had Tim Green join us as our first shed development officer today, and it's his first day on the job. So we're very thrilled to welcome Tim onto the team. And of course, our patron, Sir Harry Burns. Some of you will know Harry being our Chief Medical Officer of Scotland for many, many years, and is now the Global Chief Medical Officer at Stirling University. So we are thrilled to have someone of such esteem who's willing to be our patron towards this movement. So thank you, Sir Harry, again, for taking your time, your busy schedule, to head up our movement. And you can see that the movement continues to grow. 200 plus sheds across Scotland. We've got 2,500 members in our small charity, which is quite phenomenal. I never thought when we started this back in the day in 14 that we would have thousands of people being members of us, but we do. We're in all 32 local authority areas across Scotland, and there are over 10,000 men now voluntarily engaged in men's sheds across Scotland, as I said, voluntarily. Quite phenomenal. I'm sure there must be a Guinness World Record in there somewhere waiting to be found. Okay, next slide, please. So the vision that we carry is that one day we would have a shed in every village and every city block, that if a man over the age of 18 wanted to connect with his brothers in a place of kindness and compassion, that he would feel safe enough and a good place to go to support him in his life. So what is a men's shed? Well, a shed's a shed, but it isn't. So it's a bit of a paradox. As you can see just from the pictures, they all look incredibly different. Big, small, in between, sometimes in a shop front, sometimes in a massive hall, absolutely different, and they change as well as time goes by. The most important thing is that they are for the men, by the men. They are run by the men themselves. This is vitally important and sets it apart from many other community groups out there, quite unique. Voluntary attendance, friendship and camaraderie, which is missing when men aren't at work. That work environment is often our social network. And when we're no longer working as men, we drop out from those social circles very, very quickly. And as we retire, we downsize maybe our homes into smaller places or move communities. And we find it really hard to get out there and connect with other men. And that's just something that men generally tend to find difficult compared to women out there, we find. Active citizenship, it is a health by stealth movement. You'll see in all our magazines, we do mention health, but we don't really promote it as a health movement. We know that men can stigmatize themselves if it becomes a health issue. Dani and all her research will talk more about that later on in the day. And of course, regeneration and recycling with COP26 just on. We'll dive deeper into the recycling as well. So the beneficiaries, again, you can see there, all shapes and sizes of men, all different ages, and indirectly partners absolutely benefit. Two sides to that. We have something in the shed world called the underfoot syndrome, where men get under their wives' feet. They don't leave the house. And this can create a real strain on their relationship and their partnership. If they've got a place from A to B to go, which is the shed, it used to be work, They're used to that cycle, and they start leaving the house, which leaves her decent quiet and time to do whatever she wants to do. And the flip side of that, if the husband is looking after his wife, he needs respite care as well. And we've been told that 2 hours in a men's shed every week is better than a 1-month holiday on a cruise ship. So it just shows you that those men need their respite as well from looking after their loved ones, and it offers them that. And it's an organic place to go to. It's not as if, it's a therapy as such, or you're being therapized. It's not, but it happens. And men can thrive there. And of course, the community, family and friends benefit as well, because if dad, granddad and son are healthy, then of course the community's healthy, and so is the home and our families. So it's a win-win for everybody. Next slide, please, Susan. So who goes into a men's shed? Well, a men's shed is like a wee village. It needs every type of man to make this work. And you can see in those pictures, guys in their wheelchairs on a raised bed, growing food. You've got the guys there who need to be accountants and treasurers and people like that, who are the board because they set up as charities. So you need those men with that acumen to be able to run a legal body itself, banking, etc. Men who can listen and men who can talk, men who can tell good jokes, men who can tell bad jokes, IT skills, model railways. The bottom right, there's Bill. He's out there at Tesco's fundraising and packing bags for people at Christmas. Right the way to learning how to cook. That's a real issue for a certain age of man, where traditionally the woman would do that in the house. He becomes a carer, he becomes a widower, and often what happens is we go into salty or sugar foods, affects our health and our minds. Again, very big health implication. If men can learn how to cook before that happens and live healthily, etc., everybody's winning into older age. So cooking in sheds starting as well. We just had the Westall Men's Shed have the first shed cookbook in Scotland, I believe. That was launched for the Christmas stocking fillers, which of course I bought a couple for the staff. So we're all fixed up with that. Right, next slide, please. So let's have a look at this short film so you can actually see what's happening inside a men's shed. This was the film that was made for the application for COSLA, which I'm sure all of you know, back in the day in 2014, and they won the category for Aberdeenshire Council.
The West Hill Men's Shed is an innovative community-led approach which brings together community planning partners and the West Hill community to improve men's health and well-being. The first of its kind in Scotland, the project builds on community engagement carried out by the Garrioch Community Planning Group, which showed that many retired men living locally were at risk of becoming marginalised.
Basically, everybody comes here to enjoy themselves of one thing or another. They're either playing cards, or working on railways, or working on engines, or doing joinery work, something like that. But they're all here to enjoy themselves as well.
Run and managed by the community itself, the shed provides men of all ages with a safe, inclusive and friendly place for social interaction where they can share experiences, learn new skills, work shoulder to shoulder with other men and continue to feel valued members of the local community.
So you can see from that, that shed itself, if you go there today, has grown exponentially. They've got a big, massive porter cabin, almost doubled up their size. Again, they've got over 100 members in their shed. And you've got sheds there that have only got, 20, 30 men. Doesn't matter. Lives are being improved, and they will grow as they get to know about it. So you can see this is also a lovely quote from the Kinrossen District Men's Shed of what the National Association of the Scottish Men's Shed has done for them as a group of guys to get through the hoops of red tape that it takes to become constituted in their own right, become a charity in their own right, and become a landlord, so to speak, or a tenant in a building, and then be responsible for funding and all the money that comes with that. So we're here to support them every step of the way when they need it.
Susan, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, Julie, it was all going so well. We're just taking a bit of a pause, folks, mainly to give Jason just time to catch his breath, because we're aware that he's just given you a lot of information and he's about to give you a whole lot more. But just a wee reminder, please post any thoughts you've got, any questions, reflections in the chat pane. We're hoping that we've got time at the end, but we do have a lot of information to give you. We're going to try and break it up with some longer videos as well, and opportunity for a quick comfort break, because we are aware it's quite a long time to spend at a screen. But hopefully you've got a sense of what the Men's Shed movement and the Men's Sheds Association is, and you're interested to hear more. We'll go into a bit more detail coming up about the impact of men's sheds, what goes on in men's sheds, and some amazing examples of some of the partnerships with the community and schools, and a whole host of people. But just a reminder, please put anything that you want to tell us in the chat, and I'll hand back to Jason for the next section.
Thanks, Susan. So for you teachers out there, we're going to do a little bit of a history lesson, and it might not be about sheds. It's going to be about something else, and the present and the future. So a bit of a crystal ball moment. So let's go into the next slide and see what this is all about. So is the men's shed the holy grail of community healing and socialization? Well, let's see why we need them and where we're going. So we've seen in the men's sheds themselves that men are, let's say, victims or casualties really of our past. And this is for sayings that boys have been said to them by adults, their parents, teachers, etc. Boys don't cry, grow a pair, man up, you're a sissy, stop being like a girl. All these emasculating statements, which I certainly heard as a boy growing up, and I'm sure you might have said them or might have had them said to you inadvertently, because we learn from those who we've grown up with. What we see in the men's shed movement is that these older men are somewhat traumatized by their ability to emotionalize stuff. So at a very young age as men and boys, we close down our emotions. Thankfully, that is changing, but we've probably got another 2 or 3 generations where we have this going on in men. And so to speak about our emotions, to speak about our feelings is very, very difficult to overcome. And I'm very happy to say that when men feel safe, we start talking. And we feel safe enough to talk, and often that is to other men, and it's not to women. So the men's shed has become a haven and a place where men go and talk about their problems, which is very unheard of in our Western society. And I'm thrilled to say that it is going on in their droves now, behind these closed doors, so to speak. Men are talking about things that they would never talk about, particularly with their health as well, prostate cancers, things like that, erectile dysfunctions, things like that. You're not going to speak in front of other people, and you really need to feel comfortable to talk about these concerns and health issues. And I can tell you, folks, it is happening in our Scottish men's sheds. And also then let's look at production. We come from the post-Victorian Industrial Revolution. If we look in Scotland with the clearances, and we look at what happened to the Industrial Revolution, people left their village life and they went into far away from home, and they went into factories working often in horrendous conditions, let alone the Victorian workhouses. And so we judge ourselves today by production, the list, the famous list. How well have I done today? How many things have I ticked off the list? And this brings a lot of stress into our world. What we can also see with the Scottish Government, and we as a health men's charity have embodied this. We've gone on to a 4-day week now. We take off a Wednesday, and we've called it Wellbeing Wednesdays. So we work 2, off 1, work 2. We looked at the Swedish model and the Norwegian model, where you get a higher productivity rate out of your staff as well. And that is paying dividends for us in the Scottish Men's Shed Association. And the Scottish Government's looking at that in the normal work week as well. So 4 days a week, 3 days off, but it must be the Wednesday that you take off, not a long Friday weekend, to give you the optimum break. And one of the mantras in the men's shed is we don't do deadlines and we don't do stress in our creating. So if you want something done in the men's shed, really think about that, oh, I need it by Friday. You might not get it by Friday because the men are there to enjoy themselves and they're doing it in a loving, caring way of recycling, upcycling, making you something. The last thing we want is to put stress into their lives. So it's not a production line and it's not a service provider. These are individual voluntary guys helping themselves, first of all, and because they're healthy, they can help you. So please do keep that in mind. And then we look at the differences also between our genders. Oh, this is a hot topic for many people, but it's a topic we really need to embrace. If we look at the Australian government, they've identified with their men's sheds, and it's possibly come out of this, that they have two different health policies, one for women and girls and one for men and boys, because they've identified that men and women absolutely have different health requirements. And I've spoken to the ministers about this. We've had some polling on this in various seminars, and we've been getting a big thumbs up from a lot of the professionals. So hopefully in Scotland that'll happen. And also we communicate very differently as well. Women can talk face-to-face often very happily. For men with our testosterone that drives our bodies, that can be very aggressive. So we in the shed will say we communicate shoulder to shoulder. And what that means is when men are shoulder to shoulder and they're focusing on something in front of them to work on something, they start talking. Then our bodies get tired, the testosterone drops off. They go to the social area for a cup of tea and coffee because, of course, there's no alcohol in men's sheds. And while they're resting, let's say, their body language turns to face. They're looking at each other's eyes, trust is formed, friendships formed, testosterone levels pick up after about 20 minutes, half an hour for most men. Let's go back to that project. And so the sheds is this yo-yo effect of stop, start, which really fits well for our testosterone-fueled bodies as men. And it's no surprise then to me that the sheds feel just so perfect for men to relax in and have that inclusion and acceptance. And of course, get self-directed learning, which we're going to drop into soon. Next slide. So I'm not going to go too deeply into this because Danny's going to be talking about this later on. But I do want to bring in that last sentence there, a place and connection for life-wide and lifelong learning. So a lot of you might know lifelong learning. In fact, all of you would know about lifelong learning. But have you learned about life-wide learning? So let's have a look at that sense of purpose, life-wide learning. Let's have a look at the next slide and see what that's got to say. So the need, CLD, you know that if without the need, we can't do anything. And here you can see the need, one from an older man. He's actually our treasurer as well, John Searle from the Wee County Men's Shed. And then we have a younger man, Stuart Patton from Garnock Valley Men's Shed, who's an ex-veteran. And you can see that there's a complete age difference. You can see both these men have got time on their hands. And you can see that both these men have absolutely changed their lives by going to the sheds. Let's have a look at the next slide. So we're getting to this life wideness, and I encourage you to look at Norman Jackson's website. And we're going to focus on here about intermingling. Now, how do you intermingle? How do you actually connect with people if you're sitting at home alone or sitting at home and don't want to go to any other place? And the shed becomes this place where intermingling can happen and life-wide learning can happen. So, you know, we go to a creche as a baby, you're learning socialization skills, you're learning how to interact with other people. And we can tell from COVID now how isolated we've all become. And it's the biggest killer, more so than smoking. The one statistic came out with the NHS that loneliness and isolation is a bigger killer than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And we can all now, if anything good that's come out of this pandemic is that everybody can identify what loneliness and isolation is like. And men particularly are hardwired to do it. Don't ask me why, but we are. So we actually need a real help to help us connect. And the Men's Shed movement is doing that. But do look at Norman Jackson's stuff. Very interesting, life-wide learning. So what happens if you aren't connected in the world? You've lost your job. What do? Was your social place your workplace? Did you ever fit in at school? Do you judge yourself as a non-achiever? What are your standards as achievement? How do you feel about yourself? Whatever the reason is, you actually have time on your hands, no purpose, or can't see a way out. And what happens if you happen to be a man like this in Scotland? Well, let's have a look at the next slide. Originally, for hundreds of years, what we were given was the pubs, great social meeting place. But alcohol, men are definitely into the riskier business, and then women for sure, and betting shops. They will welcome all men. What else did we have? Unless you were specific with a sport or a hobby or bowls or something like that, there's not really any place for us across the whole Western world for men just to socialise outside of religion or politics or something like that. But now, thankfully, we have the Men's Shed movement. And some statistics of why it's important for you, and this is very sobering that I'm gonna fire off at you now, that men are 3 times more likely to become dependent on alcohol than women. They're twice as likely to become drug dependent. They're 7 times more likely to become addicted to gambling, 3 times more likely to take their lives. Suicide is the biggest single cause of death of men under the age of 46, with 12 men suiciding every day in the UK. These are horrendous statistics that's happening to our men and our sons and our fathers out there, particularly that 33 to 46-year-old age group, particularly with COVID and coming out of the pandemic and so many businesses losing their businesses and losing their jobs. Men's sheds are never going to be needed more than ever now. So we need your help with this to help these guys and help their families, of course. Okay, next slide, please. So let's listen right now to the men themselves of what's actually changed their lives. Rather than me telling you, let's listen to the men.
Robert John Owen.
And how old are you?
90 in July.
So how has your life changed from a year ago to coming now?
Oh, it's given me a second life, because now I've got into doing things. I'm a much happier person. I was a bit miserable because I lost my wife last year, and I went through a very deep mourning session. Sorry. And I've been married 67 years, so you can imagine that, you know, the loss of a wife like that was deeply affected. Yeah. I was deeply affected, and although you get a lot of sympathy, it's not enough. And I went through a very sad time, and suddenly one day I thought, I come to the Men's Shed, see what it's like again. And once I was here, you know, I met Angus. Angus had lost his voice because he had a heart attack, and he was trying to speak properly again. So I used to sit with Angus every time, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We sat together and he talked and talked until he obviously was getting better. Then one day I saw on the notice board there, table and 2 chairs. And I thought, oh, that seems a good idea. So I put my name in.
So when you wake up in the morning now, compared to 6 months ago?
Oh, I'm a happier bloke. Much happier bloke. Yeah.
Okay. And I
look forward to coming here. I really do. I really do. Invaluable. All the talk, and we have a bit of back chat, you know, especially Mike and me, we rib each other terrible. But it's nice. And the fact that we're all equal, because it doesn't matter how old or young you are, or where you've been and what you've done, we're all equal. And it's our shed.
I'm Jeremy, and I am a sociology PhD student at the University of Aberdeen. I'm 25 and most of the guys here are at least over 50s. What I found anyway, a lot of the guys in there, they're all they're all sort of hidden teachers. I'm not. I'm a bookish person. I'm not great with tools or what have you. I find a lot of the chaps here come in, and they're only too happy to offer advice and suggestions to me. Say, hey, you should do this. Hey, I'll show you how to do that. And you know, it's like intergenerational transfer of knowledge.
I was born in Stornoway, but I came to Keith when I was 5. I've worked mostly out of the town in my working career. So now that I've retired, although everyone in the town seemed to know me, I wasn't quite sure who they were. Retirement hung heavy in my hands until I heard about the men's shed, and I went along and I met and got to know people that I've seen going about all my life. The camaraderie, if that's the word you take it, is excellent. The meetings are friendly, lots of chat, and they've improved retired life immensely.
John Wilson, 84.
84. Does that make you the oldest man in the shed?
Yes.
It does. How long have you been coming, John?
About a year.
So what do you do in the shed? Why do you come here?
Make bird boxes just for companionship. I'm just on my own, and it's just for relaxation, and I'm getting old and I'm trying to keep as agile as much as I can. So that's why I come to the shed, and it's a good class of boys and that, and thoroughly enjoy working with them, and it's actually helped one another.
So do you find that, as you said, we don't have a shed, but the journey to the shed and doing these kind of coffee mornings gives the men then a purpose or a role?
Oh yes, definitely.
And have you found that, I was filming some guys with strokes and stuff in here, and they were saying that coming out and socialising and speaking more rather than maybe being at home alone, and it's helped in their lives.
Yeah.
Have you witnessed any of that?
Well, personally speaking, you see, I didn't have a stroke, but I did have neurosurgery, and that's why my face and my voice and my balance and my coordination aren't quite right. And although I was a teacher, teaching a class of youngsters is totally different to addressing adults. So on the occasions when Iain's not here, the chairman, I've got to chair the meetings, and I had never chaired meetings before. So it was a very rapid learning curve, if that's the right phrase, because I just wasn't used to that. Because teaching kids, folk think, oh, he's a teacher, he can do that. But chairing a meeting so that everybody gets a chance to speak, and you don't get folk that dominate it, and you get proper discussion. I'm not saying I'm a brilliant chairman, but there's definitely a skill and a technique. So you have to watch other folk and see how they do it, and you just have to put in your own personal input. So it's helped my confidence.
Fantastic. So we can see there from those men themselves, so diverse, different ages, how it's impacted them. Even a teacher who has worked for many, many years in front of young people has found it challenging to work with a group of men, but is loving it and is voluntarily becoming the vice chair of their shed and engaging him as well. And if we look at this last slide in this section, again, it's about looking at what is it identifying, and Danny's going to get into this: boredom, inactivity, loneliness problems, smoking, alcohol, cancer, all these risky behaviors that we see associated often with men more than women. And again, that new place, the magnet, is what the shed is. If you don't have the place, that life-wide learning, that intermingling cannot happen because the men are staying self-isolated. so important with the Community Empowerment Bill in Scotland, and very unique. That bill passed is very upfront for men's sheds to be able to have a shed or a place that they can go to. And we're going to talk on later, I think Julie will talk on later about the Community Empowerment Bill as well in Scotland. I'll see you on the other side.
Thank you very much, Jason. We are just going to take a quick comfort break here. If you would like to stretch your legs, grab a glass of water, nip to the toilet, any of the above or anything else you would like to do before 10 to 5. So if that's all right with everyone, we will come back in 5 minutes or so, 4 or 5 minutes at 16:50. While we are having a break, if you would like to find out more about joining the Scottish Men's Shed Association, you can have a look at that link on screen there. We'll also post it in the chat for you if you're staying at your screen during the break and you want to be nosy on their website. So I will stop talking now and come back at 10 to 5. Thank you all very much so far. To the legs there. Conscious it wasn't a very long break. However, it's good just to break up the session, and we've got so much content during this next part of the session that we are really keen to share with you. So we're going to kick off this part of the session by thinking a little bit about learning for sustainability. Learning for sustainability is the umbrella term that we use for sustainable development education, outdoor learning, global citizenship and social justice. As you'll see from this word cloud, it encompasses a huge range of themes and approaches across all forms of education, both formal and non-formal. From listening to Jason earlier and from watching the video, we hope that you can see lots here that relate to learning for sustainability. We see many connections between men's shed, STEM, learning for sustainability and the principles of community learning and development. And moving on, we just thought we'd highlight as well the global goals. So the Sustainable Development Goals are a collection of 17 interlinked global goals which were designed as a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. Sustainable Development Goals were agreed by the UN General Assembly in 2015 and they are intended to be achieved by the year 2030. These goals are broad and interdependent and they recognise ending poverty with other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education and reduce inequality and spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. So when carrying out pieces of work in your setting, it can be helpful to look at the Sustainable Development Goals and identify links to specific goals depending on your project's outcomes. And we hope you can see lots here relating to the work that Jason's told us about in the men's sheds. Also, we thought we'd like to highlight the Community Empowerment Act, as it's been a hugely helpful vehicle for change within men's sheds, especially in terms of asset transfer and allowing sheds to access and take ownership of unused buildings. Wider community and council support for men's sheds is an important factor when dealing with the ownership of control of land and buildings, as sometimes different people in different roles within councils and communities can give approval for asset transfer and things like that. So it's a really important act in terms of men's sheds and progressing forward. Susan, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, Julie. I'm sure you're already thinking about, there's maybe some ideas sparking off about how you could link up with your local men's shed to benefit your learners. The last section that we're going to move on to is about that impact on individuals and communities. And there's a whole host, as you can imagine, and we've just got a slide here covering some of them that Jason's already touched on, and he'll go into in a bit more detail. But that impact on the individual man, and then their family, their friends, the partnerships that the sheds have across nationally that the association has, but also the local partnerships. And we'll give you some examples of those. The community partnerships with schools, with local community groups. Again, we'll give you some examples for that. Economy, the kind of value for money aspect of all this, which we'll touch on too. And the environmental side of things. Julie mentioned learning for sustainability. And again, Jason will give some examples of sheds who have had a real focus and done lots about recycling and reusing and lots around that. Before we move on to the last section in Jason, we've just got another video for you, which we filmed just prior to the most recent COVID restrictions. So we managed to sneak this in just before the end of 2021. And this was filmed down at the Shed of the Year in Inverclyde. So enjoy. It just gives a bit of a snapshot of a shed in action and mentions some of those partnerships that we're going to talk about in more detail.
Hi, I'm Bruce Newlands. I'm the current treasurer of the Inverclyde Shed and was previously chair for the first 3 years of the Inverclyde Shed. I'm a working individual and I was really just looking for somewhere to kind of spend some spare time. I work for myself, I work from the house, so I wanted a wee release, to kind of, normally guys go down to the bottom of the garden into their own shed, but I'd heard about the men's shed network and found out there was one starting in Inverclyde, so got involved. It's quite a wide range of things happening in Inverclyde Shed, so it can be anything from making pens through to making boats. We kind of cover everything. It really, you bring your interest along and you'll find people that share that interest and want to get involved and help you. I think for people coming along to Inverclyde Shed, the basic thing is just human company, so it's friendship, over a cup of tea, having a blether, working on a project. Over and above that, there's also kind of sharing of knowledge and skills and ideas. And this transposes not just in the workshop, but also in the gardening that we do. So we like to kind of pay back to the community, whether it's making things for other community groups or growing food for the local community pantry. I think winning Men's Shed of the Year has really brought a huge sense of pride to us from our own community. It's been important that kind of confirming that what we're doing is right, and it's important and that people value it.
Memorial cross from St John's Church in Union Street in Greenock. One of the parishioners that was put up in memory of her father, but it was going to be a bit weather beaten, so they asked if we could maybe take it back and restore it. So what we're busy doing here at the moment is taking all the old varnish off using card scrapers, an awful lot quicker than trying to sand it. And this is only just an hour or so's work on it, and we're down to the wood already on the big portions. Andrew's busy finishing off some of the corners and such like. I don't know if you can actually see it in camera, but it's actually starting to come up quite nicely. Once we get it all stripped back, we're going to a few more coats of varnish on it before taking it back down to the person. So working with these things it's quite satisfying working with your hands again, just doing things. You don't need to think about anything, you're just working away and you can get into a rhythm.
My name's Eddie Mcguin. I'm an ex-welder and I've been a member of the shed now for about two and a half years. I came along because I had some personal injuries and I couldn't apply my trade anymore. I got into a bit of a rut, get advice to come and introduce myself here, and it was the best thing I ever done. At the time it was almost about 100% woodwork orientated, but it turned out when I introduced myself and they asked me what I had done as a job, they said they had 2 welding sets in here and they never knew the top from the bottom. So I rigged them up and it's just a wee metalwork sections expanded through there. So I come along and do wee projects, making a couple of table legs here. And eventually it might be a case of other people want to learn a wee bit of architectural metalwork and stuff like that. So mainly what I get out of it is massive physical and mental health. It's you get something to get up for in the morning, you've got the company, the creativity, learning, watching what other people are doing, people watching what you're doing, and everybody showing an interest. You get a great deal out of it.
One of the big projects that we've been working on, so we've installed 20 what we call small growing spaces in schools right across Inverclyde, from Weems Bay to Port Glasgow, and we've just received funding from the National Lottery to install another 14 of them. So we're almost covering the whole school estate in Inverclyde, where we've got ongoing partnerships where we don't just put the growing spaces in for them, we help show them how to grow things as well. So it's showing kids the importance of locally grown food, the skills involved with that, and also the patience involved with it as well, that it's not a quick win. It takes time. So we try and plan things round about their curriculum. So things are planted when they're in school and they harvest them when they're still in school as well. And it's great fun at the same time as well. Well, welcome to the Inverclyde Shed's Show Street Garden project. It's a community garden based in Gourock. It's where we grow lots of vegetables, where people can get a little bit of their own time, so you can work by yourself or you can work in teams here. We put the produce to our local community pantry, so it goes for free, so that vulnerable people can pick up fresh veg. And we try and grow all sorts of different varieties down here that maybe stretch what people expect. So we've in the last growing season, we've had 15 different varieties of tatties growing here. A lot of them kind of heritage varieties like Shetland Blacks and Arran Victories. But we've also got fruit trees, we've got brassicas. It's the start of December and we're still growing here, kind of thing. So for me, this outdoor space really provides a real, it's a different type of space to the workshops. It just allows you to kind of get out in the fresh air and really keep busy during months where the shed might be busier with other people.
Hi, I'm Charlie and I come down to the garden every couple of days or sometime every day. Bruce, the supervisor, sends me a list and he comes down as well and we work together. Tidying it up, keeping it looking decent for the community, and of course picking vegetables and taking it to the pantry at Grieve Road. For me personally, it's lovely and relaxing. It gives me something to do. Anything's better than sitting in the house all day twiddling your thumbs. You're out in the fresh air. You're getting job satisfaction, but knowing you're giving something back to the community and not just taking. And I just love the fact that just being out in the open, really. And that's what I like about it. Shed's a great organisation. It's helping a lot of people, meeting people, talking to people. And sometimes that's the best medicine you'll ever get, is sit and talk to somebody. But yes, it's most enjoyable. And I love coming down here and doing it.
I live in high flats over there, that big white window. That's my kitchen. I see everything from there. And that's how I saw this garden starting up. When I was first here, this was supposed to be a secret garden, quotes. It was actually shrubs, trees, bushes, brambles and rubbish and ivy. A whole mass. There have been more things happening here and more community involvement, you know, to keep it going and build it up. People can see it from the streets now, and it's no longer a secret garden. I can walk down that wee path there, and I come through the garden, the George Wiley garden, and it's totally accessible, you know.
The Inverclyde Shed has been really fortunate with a number of high-profile funders, mainly the National Lottery, but also the Cora Foundation and Foundation Scotland as well as local funders like Amazon and the Inverclyde Community Fund. Where that's went is it's really allowed us to do all these activities helping our community. It's funded all these things, and it's culminated in a community asset transfer of a large 4,000 square foot shed, which we've now got a lease for 25 years on at £1 a year, and £500,000 funding from the Scottish Government to renovate it. So we like to think that we're putting something in place that's going to last generations in Inverclyde.
Fantastic. What better than actually seeing it from the horse's mouth? And those guys, typical working away, chatting, and John there, who is a master gardener. When I was down there, he gave me lots of tips for my own polytunnels, and he was an IBM engineer back in the day, and now he really looks after the garden there, looking from his flat window, the CCTV man himself, keeping sure that everything is good happening in that wee garden. So let's have a look, and let's just go into sustainability, well-being, like Bruce was talking about there from Inverclyde, and the communities and how we connect. So again, the connection. Sheds are run, as I keep saying to you, and just going to drive that point home, sheds are run by themselves, for the men, by the men. And it is this connection to community where community is supporting them, buying their produce, bringing them things to upcycle, recycle, etc., etc. And of course, the men themselves come from those communities. So there's no way that they can stay isolated by themselves like this little quenga or this little gang of guys in a wee shed. If they're not integrating and socializing and working within their communities, the interconnection, they just can't survive, and let alone survive, they can't thrive. And so they're almost forced really out of the isolation to survive and then thrive. Depending on the variety of skills which we're going to go into, every men's shed is absolutely different. So just go back one there, Susan. Yeah, there we go. What do the sheds provide actually in the communities and the variety of things? And every shed is different. So depending on what type of men are in the shed depends on what skills they have. And it evolves and changes all the time, which is fantastic. So we can see here, top left, there a whole lot of benches that have been made for a primary school by the West Hill guys, nicely painted. We can see some recycled bicycle tyres and rims from cars painted to decorate a fence for a creche. Next to that, you can see a grey shipping container, which is a storage for the Black Owl men's shed, and the youngsters did the mural for it with them. And then in the middle, you can see on right and left, I don't know if you've ever heard of mud kitchens before. Before this movement, I'd never ever heard of a mud kitchen. Well, I've been educated to see that these mud kitchens are a fantastic educational portal for our youngsters in learning to mucky play and learning to hold and look at whole different shapes, etc., identify different shapes. The learning that comes from mud kitchens for our youngsters is phenomenal. And the men's sheds, as you can see, what beautiful creations they've done for these creches right across Scotland. It's really taken up well. Bottom left, you see a nice bench to sit on. But actually, inside that are some round discs, which out of Stonehaven, back in the 50s and 60s, the men used to go to the village square and play checkers. And they've been asked to make this from recycled wood, which is a beautiful job. And inside there are the checkers, so they can push them around. And what's the latest Shedder magazine coming out, our magazine in February? We've got an article in there with a fantastic shot of men in their suits playing this game in exactly the same place. And then we move across to the right, guys making really high-end archery bows, professional archery bows, to our community with swinging benches, and the bottom right, making these big owl boxes and working with various RSBB organisations, etc., across Scotland, mink traps, all those types of things men's sheds are making. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And then, of course, men's sheds are now getting involved with veterans. Of course, veterans are a fantastic source of can-do attitude, not only on the 1,500 youngsters over 20-year-olds leaving the forces every year, but our older veterans. And we work with Unforgotten Forces. We're one of the members of that, so we work across all the different agencies in Scotland, them telling them about men's sheds and us advertising, Poppy Scotland, etc., what's going on there. And you can see in September the opening of the Bankery men's shed, which is the first men's shed which is built in a Legion building itself up at Ravenswood. And there's none other than Princess Anne herself, Princess Royal, who came up and opened the shed for them in September. Fantastic. So let's get into partnerships with schools. I'm sure all of those you recognise. Youth and Philanthropy Initiative, YPI. A lot of schools across Scotland, the youngsters have heard about the men's sheds, they love it, and they've gone out there and they've taken it as their charity of choice. And that's £3,000 that goes to the shed if they are chosen. And I can tell you that many are successful. And the men, from the young age group right the way up to these older guys in the sheds, fantastic to see that this intergenerational work is going on. John Muir Awards, when I was a youth worker, we did this at West Hill, where the guys, you can see the pictures here. We used the men's shed to build bird boxes, and we then worked with the rangers in the local wood to put them up with these youngsters over an 8-week period. Fantastic time with them. You can see obviously in the bottom right there's Bruce working with Inverclyde with the gardens he was mentioning. Again, a nice mud kitchen. There's David from West Hill. The youngsters at a primary school collected all the 2-litre bottles, and the shed made the frame and put up their greenhouse for them in the primary school. Fantastic. And then bottom left, reusing tyres, etc., in the playground for kids, toys, etc., like that for them to play on. So you can see great partnerships with schools, and I hope that gives you some idea of what you could do with your men's sheds as well. And then onto the community side, this is only a few of them. 12 Guitars charity in Glasgow, you might have heard of them. Fantastic charity where they get donated often broken guitars, etc. They fix them up and they donate them back to young people, and they even teach them how to play. So we've identified with them that maybe the men's sheds around Scotland can take guitars, and they will teach them actually how to fix guitars and then start interacting with music with the sheds. Defibrillators. Of course, if you've got a defib in a men's shed, the community can use it, as you can see bottom right being fitted to outside the shed. War memorials, PPE production. Thousands and thousands of these face shields were created with computers, etc., and printing them out in the sheds. Men at home taking them home, working from their gardens. 5,000 of these when the pandemic hit. And some of them got the Queen's Award for that initiative. You can see also at BIMS there, they've got a cycle where people who are at home or have health issues can actually sit and be cycled around by the guys in the sheds to go to different places and see the local village. And then lastly, bottom left and top right, you've got a limb replacement being fixed. Didn't know this, but limbs after someone is deceased aren't passed on. However, the Stonehaven men's shed get them through their rotary, they recondition them, and that set of boxes in the top right are about to be sent off to Africa for people in minefields, etc., have had their limbs blown off, and they can then build limbs again for those people in Africa. Absolutely fantastic initiative that the men's sheds are supporting now across the world. Next slide, Susan. So health and intergenerational, bottom left, youngsters are coming in and helping guys get IT skills and teaching them all the latest pros and cons of the IT stuff. Cooking is a big issue with men, particularly older men, where traditionally women have done that. Either he becomes a widower and he then starts eating sugary, salty foods, comfort food while he's grieving, or he looks after his wife and hasn't really cooked before. So getting men to cook in sheds is a win-win for everybody. And as long as wives have told me, if he actually cooked, maybe I wouldn't have divorced him. And I'm serious, that was an excellent comment that I got from one of the wives in the sheds. So come on, men, you've got to learn to cook. It's all good. You can see also polytunnels, people growing food, and then cooking in there, men sitting around the tables, eating together. Nothing better than your mates cooking food for you. A lot of these men we know in the sheds who eat like this will have one good meal a day if they're living by themselves. Planting trees, like Bruce has said, top right. Fantastic. I love that saying. Wise people plant trees whose shade they will never sit under. This is intergenerational wisdom. They're planting fruit trees, etc. And a lot of the families often plant trees in their families as well. Bees and orchards go hand in hand. Wonderful. And then bicycles. We've got little bicycles where a lot of sheds fix up the bikes and then donate them back, or for a small donation back to youngsters who can't afford bicycles. And Kinross Men's Shed there with an e-bike. They are upcycling a lot of old mountain bikes, putting on this battery, etc., which means older people can cycle again, not only with their family and loved ones, but they can take them on weekends and go around the area where, those knees get a bit tired. They become isolated. These e-bikes are saving lives and getting people connected again. So health and intergenerational men's sheds, who would have thought that would have been something we would be doing as well? This is something that happened this year, very new. The Queen's Award, which is the highest award for voluntary service in the country. 2 sheds received it, West Hall Men's Shed and Aberhuda Men's Shed, for their voluntary service. And I'm sure we'll be seeing more of this across the country and in the years to come, being recognised for this Queen's Award. Fantastic. And the big 5 R's: repurpose, recycle, reuse, reclaim and restore. We love that in the sheds. So you can see the bottom right, big Pantechnicons there, rigs coming in with all this wood. What's this all about? Well, this is recycled wood from COP26 that were given to some Glasgow sheds when they broke that whole infrastructure down. And we even heard when the guys took them apart, there was a door that said Boris Johnson on it. So you can imagine the fun that's going to be had in that shed. They're also connected to Balfour Beatty and Robertson's Construction. You can see them picking up pallets. So these big building companies, rather than putting all their waste, so to speak, into landfill, the sheds can go with these big national contractors and get this wood, etc., piping, etc., for free from them. What else have we got here? Far left-hand side, we had a karting race here, D-Side Motor Show. Some of the sheds came up and built their carts and raced against each other. This is the guys that are using a sit-on lawnmower construction to build their cart. Unfortunately, they didn't win, but they had a lot of fun at the event at the castle. And lastly, top right, Stonehaven again. This was a floodplain. The town gets flooded quite regularly. So they put in new defences, and this lovely metalwork from the Victorian age was rescued. And they built those and put them into lovely Bloom Scotland flowers outside their shed. So you can see loads of carbon footprint, win-win for sheds across Scotland. And with the price of wood that we find today in metal, not only is it saving sheds from having to buy new wood, but it's keeping the costs down on running the sheds, which is vital, of course. And funding and support. You know, these are the people who are supporting big companies out there, big funders out there. But it's not only with money. They are giving, you know, we could look Tesco's, biscuits, etc. The co-op are offering hand sanitizers. Bottom right, we've got our MSPs who love men's sheds, coming and opening the sheds, cutting the ribbons, etc. So we get support through lots of different ways. There's a youngster there from Inverclyde with his dog. He committed to run, I think it was a mile a day for a week, by himself with his dog to fundraise for his men's shed. Look how young that kid is. And he is there fundraising for these men in his village, because when he gets to be 18, he wants that shed still to be there. That's how much he loves it in his village. And this is the intergenerational success of men's sheds. Just absolutely love it. So I'm going to leave you there, and I will see you afterwards. And I'm sure Susan will come in and introduce what's happening next.
Thank you very much, Jason. I see that we've still got the majority of you with us, which is fantastic for after 5 p.m. We really appreciate you staying around, because the next 5 to 10 minutes are really important. So I'll just hand over to Dr. Danielle Hutcheon to take us through her recent research.
Hello everyone, just to say thanks for having me, and I hope this isn't too dry after all the fantastic videos that have been played throughout the event so far. My name is Dr. Dani Hutcheon, and I am a researcher from Glasgow Caledonian University from the Unis Centre for Social Business and Health. So we were funded by the National Lottery Community Fund to do a 4-year project. It was conducted by a team of researchers from Glasgow Caledonian University with myself as the lead researcher. And we did a project working with 5 sheds from across Scotland, so sheds from rural areas, urban areas, affluent areas, deprived areas, and sheds of all different shapes and sizes. So the key aims of the project were to identify the main development challenges that sheds were facing and find ways to make them more sustainable, so actually working with the sheds. And also to explore using mixed methods, the health and wellbeing impacts of shed activities on their users. So as mentioned by Jason, the need for this evidence is so important to be able to kind of support the movement and support the kind of voluntary sector more widely. And it was evidence that we didn't necessarily have in Scotland about men's sheds, with most of the evidence coming from Australia. Next slide, please. So when what we did to look at the kind of main sustainability and development challenges that sheds were facing, we did this through a number of kind of interviews, focus groups, and through participant workshops with the sheds, and spending a lot of time in sheds myself, which was fantastic. And so what we found that the sheds that we worked with were predominantly older men, also with health issues relating to ageing or long-term disability. We found that the majority of the members that we spoke to were retired and were seeking to kind of escape from the formality of a working environment, so looking for kind of like relaxation and leisure activities. And we found that amongst all of the sheds that we spoke to, there was this kind of key shed ethos that, as mentioned by Jason, the sheds were created and run by the men for the men. And there was also this idea of kind of having the men having a freedom and a sense of informality with no obligation or responsibility. So it's not a workplace, there's no kind of responsibility on people. You go there and you do whatever you enjoy. And we also found that the sheds were more of a kind of informal, organic movement rather than intended third sector organisations. So a lot of the sheds kind of started from men just meeting in local cafes or in each other's kitchens or gardens and chatting about the fact that there wasn't a lot going on in the community for men outside of, say, the pub or the bookies, and kind of taking it from there. Next slide, please. So because of all these kind of the nature and characteristics of the men's sheds that we spoke to, this really affected their ability to kind of source skilled volunteers to undertake core operational tasks. So as mentioned by Jason, there's always kind of paperwork involved with running a voluntary organisation, whether that be kind of writing funding applications, applying for premises, taking care of kind of membership, holding people's data, bank accounts, all sorts. So when you think of kind of the nature of the retired members who are maybe not necessarily looking to take on that kind of responsibility and literally just want to go there for kind of leisure and relaxation purposes, it also affected the shed's ability to acquire suitable premises. So some of you might know that acquiring premises from kind of public authorities or privately can be quite a kind of onerous task in terms of the paperwork that's involved, the time it takes, negotiations, and dealing with kind of different levels of bureaucracy and stuff. So when you've kind of got a group of men who are just looking to have a good time and have fun, it's often not these aren't the type of tasks that they necessarily enjoy, and it can also kind of take away that enjoyment. Same with sourcing funding and generating income. For anyone, I know myself from writing funding applications, it's never a fun task and can take a lot of time. Also ensuring the health and safety of members, and as you can imagine, in sheds they often house a lot of kind of different hand tools and power tools and all sorts of different types of equipment. And when you have members who are all from different abilities and backgrounds, some with kind of complex health needs as well, or issues with mobility or aging related issues, you can imagine the type of kind of things that need to be put in place to be able to ensure the health and safety of members, but also questions about who's actually responsible for that as well. So that kind of links to the final part about the nature of sheds. It affected their ability to welcome members with complex health needs. So being able to ensure that, so say you have members that are coming along who maybe have complex physical health needs, being able to source the funding and the support to be able to facilitate those types of complex health concerns. Next slide, please. So that was just a kind of overview of some of the findings we found from the first aim of the project, which is all about sustainability and development. So I'm just going to talk briefly also about the second aim of the project, which was to look at the impact on the health and well-being of the actual men using the sheds. So what we found that within med sheds there were three kind of core elements. So there was a practical and educational element, so space to take part in practical activities like woodwork, metalwork, or take part in kind of educational activities like cooking or having people coming along and doing health talks. There is also the social and interactive element. So as well as being a space to kind of take part in practical activity, there was a lot of priority placed on the social and interactive elements. So having a space to socialise, whether that just be a small area of the shed where you can stop and have a cup of tea, or a dedicated social area, or just the opportunities that were created kind of for the men while taking part in that. And finally, that what a majorly important area was the inclusive and supportive element of sheds. So having that informal, flexible space where men of all backgrounds can come along to their sheds, bring their own interests, bring their own skills, bring their own knowledge, and also an area where men can gain social support and share their experiences in a safe and male-friendly environment. So, for example, talk about mental health in a space that feels safe and secure and informal, and they're amongst friends. Next slide, please. So just an overview of our findings. So when we analysed all of the findings, we looked at them in terms of mental health benefits, physical health benefits, and benefits to the social well-being of men shed users. So in terms of mental health, we found that men shed users reported having increased confidence, decreased depression and anxiety, an increased overall feeling of happiness and contentment, a sense of relaxation, and that sense of purpose. So just to say, we gathered this information through in-depth interviews. So it was a real kind of way of gathering kind of rich data and spending a lot of time with the shedders and building those relationships for them to be able to tell their stories about the impacts that the shed actually had on them. So just go back to what I was saying about sense of purpose. So that was an important one, in particular for men after they retired or whether they were unemployed. So having that kind of sense of routine in their lives. And as Jason mentioned, a lot of the men that go to sheds, they may be retired or unemployed, but they have such a wide range of skills and knowledge. So you're talking about people who, in their working lives, they had really, leadership roles, professional roles. They worked in IT, they ran factories across the world. So a wealth of knowledge that suddenly feels redundant as soon as they retire. So going to a shed and being able to share all of that skills, all those skills and all of that knowledge that people have kind of acquired through their life with others, really giving them a sense of purpose. So in terms of physical health as well, so you found that we found that men reported that from being more mobile, getting out of the house and actually going to the shed, and then being actively on their feet activities, it improved their mobility and decreased their sense of frailty. Also, it was used as a type of kind of pain management. So people who had kind of long-term issues with chronic pain, for example, used the shed as a good distraction from the pain. We also found that people reported an improved diet from going to the shed, especially when sheds had kind of people coming along and delivering educational talks about nutrition, and also men sharing recipes and healthy eating recipes and stuff amongst themselves and cooking for each other, and also decreased alcohol use. So because men's sheds are sober environments, so where you had men who might previously socialise in the pub, they were now basically going to the shed instead. So in terms of social well-being, so you had decreased social isolation and loneliness, increased social networks, an increased sense of belonging to something, belonging to that sense of community. Next slide, please. So what we found overall was that men's shed activities impacted on the health and well-being of men across many different cross-cutting ways that were both obvious and non-obvious. Their informal and flexible nature meant that activities could be tailored to specific needs with men within communities. And success was shown in bringing health education activities to shed environments, such as the delivery of health talks by nurses. Next slide, please. However, what we did find was that sheds didn't want to kind of formalise or become like a formal service, like a health service. There were many kind of issues around members with complex health issues and responsibility for care. For example, members who maybe have early onset Alzheimer's, or, you know, how do you negotiate that? And also some relationships with health and social care practitioners were already strained. So in terms of kind of health and social care workers perhaps phoning up and saying, can I drop off clients to the shed? And that's something that sheds find quite difficult to negotiate, whether they can say no, or, you know, what their responsibility is over care of that person, just as an example. So I'll just finish there. That was a kind of a whirlwind trip around our research project. But we do have a massive range of outputs that are available, most notably the Mentioned Toolkit, the UK and Ireland, which is a really important resource that we created with a number of partners, including Jason, the Scottish Mentioned Association. It's a vital resource for those who are thinking about setting up a men's shed, or those who already have a men's shed and are facing kind of sustainability and development challenges, just as a kind of a one-stop shop for all of your shedding needs. So I'll post a link to the website where you can find that. You can also find that on the Scottish Men's Shed Association webpage as well. But thank you for having me. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dani. That was just fantastic, and to see that data and research backing up what Jason has been telling us all afternoon, it is just wonderful. And Susan's popped in the chat there that we'll share all the links to the research and the toolkit. Afterwards, you should all receive an email with the PowerPoint slides and things. Won't promise today, but it'll be over the next few days. So we're just going to pop a link to the Menti in the chat, and if you could possibly vote on how you feel about your knowledge on men's sheds now, that would be amazing if we could do that. I'll take over sharing my screen. And it's just a little bit of an evaluation. I know we're really tight for time and we really appreciate you staying with us. It's now very dark in Dundee, so yeah, we do really appreciate you staying with us and staying online just to do this evaluation exercise. I can see 10 people have got on the Menti, so that's great. If you're having any problems, just stick up your hand. David, feel free to come in. Ask a question or anything like that, that's totally fine. And if you're struggling to get on the Menti, feel free to just pop any comments or feedback in the chat. It's much appreciated. And hopefully I'll move this on now, and you should see another question come up on your Menti. So whether that be if you're accessing it on your phone or via the link in the chat. The question would be, how would you rate your experience of this session overall? Please don't worry, it is anonymous. Don't feel like you need to give us a really positive one. If you've got any constructive criticism, we'll always appreciate it. I see somebody's got their hand up here. David, feel free to unmic, come in, or ask any questions.
Sorry, hand went up there, don't worry about it.
No, that's okay, no worries. No worries at all. It's great to see your feedback coming in there. I believe there's one more question, and it will just be an answer box that hopefully will pop up on your screen and ask for some feedback on the session. And hopefully that should come up just about now, and it's just a text box. If you do have any quick questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat, but I know we're now running out of time. We can share the email addresses as well of our presenters, so that if you have any direct questions, you can go to them afterwards, because I know there was a couple of comments in the chat, I think Punch from Muir and veterans accessing sheds, so I know Jason would be extremely happy to answer them. I will appreciate you sticking around so far and to fill up that evaluation for us there. It's great to see the positive comments coming in, so thank you very much. And we'll leave that open for a couple of minutes. If you do, feel free to pop any comments in the chat just now. That's great. Fab, it's nice to see the positivity coming in there. That's a nice way to end your day, isn't it? That's great. And like we said at the start, it's been a long time in the planning. We will be developing a page on the National Improvement Hub, so we can circulate that as well. That'll host the recording of this video, but it'll also host links to Danny's toolkit and to some of the references that Jason made today to different documents. We will host them all together in one page so it's easily accessible for everyone. So we'll be able to send that out as well. So I think all that's left for me to do, if there's no comments in the chat, is to just say a huge thank you very much. We will send out this email afterwards in the coming days, which will have all these links in it, but likewise we'll also be hosting an online page, so hopefully everybody is able to access them. Thanks to Danny for presenting our research, and thanks to Jason for all of his inspiration today. It's great to share the passion and the learning and all of that experience, so huge thanks to Jason. Also thanks to our colleagues Joanne and Iain for their filming and their editing and pulling it all together for us. So thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for you all for coming along. I feel a bit like I'm accepting an Oscar now, so I'll just keep going. But thank you all very much for coming along. Have a lovely evening, and we'll share the links when we have them. Thank you.